The blood-red sunset cast long shadows across the dusty plains of Colorado Territory. 1875. As Hope Kendrick clutched her youngest daughter's feverish body against her chest, praying the girl's lungs would clear before morning. The hostile whispers from the townspeople of Redemption Creek echoed in her mind. Another girl. What kind of woman bears 5 daughters and no sons? Hope dabbed a cool cloth against 4-year-old Abigail's forehead, trying to soothe the child's ragged breathing. At 32, Hope had buried her husband Thomas 18 months ago, leaving her alone with their 5 daughters on a struggling homestead. The town that once welcomed them now turned cold eyes upon her family. "Mama," whispered 9-year-old Eliza from the doorway of their modest cabin. "Sheriff Patterson is coming up the road." Hope's stomach tightened. She gently laid Abigail on the bed and smoothed her apron. "Stay with your sister. Keep the cloth cool." Outside, Sheriff Patterson dismounted, his weathered face solemn beneath his hat. "Mrs. Kendrick," he began, not meeting her eyes, "the town council met yesterday." "About what concern of mine?" Hope asked, though she suspected. "Your property taxes. They've been reassessed. Due next month." He handed her a notice, the figure at the bottom making her heart sink. "This is 3 times what we paid last year," she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Times are hard for everyone," he muttered. "Council feels a woman alone can't properly work this land. Several interested parties have made offers. Offers to take my home. The land my husband and I built together." Her voice rose despite her efforts. "This is theft disguised as taxation." The sheriff shuffled uncomfortably. "Just delivering the notice, madam. Nothing personal." "Nothing personal," Hope echoed bitterly. "Tell me, Sheriff, would Mr. Henderson receive the same notice if he had 5 daughters instead of his precious sons?" The man's silence was answer enough. After he rode away, Hope leaned against the porch post, the unfair tax notice crumpled in her fist. Inside, her daughters waited. Elizabeth, the eldest at 12, responsible beyond her years. Eliza, 9, with her quick mind. Margaret, 7, gentle and kind. Catherine, 6, bold and adventurous. And little Abigail, fighting pneumonia at 4. Returning inside, Hope found Elizabeth already preparing the evening meal, her sleeves rolled up as she stirred a pot of thin stew. "Is it true what Sheriff Patterson said?" Elizabeth asked quietly, her eyes too knowing for a child. "Don't you worry about grown-up matters," Hope answered, though her trembling hands betrayed her fear. "I heard Mrs. Wilson at church," Eliza piped up. "She said we're a burden on the town because you only had girls and no boys." Hope knelt before her daughters, gathering them close. "You listen to me. You are never, ever a burden. You are my greatest blessings, each one of you. We will find a way." But as she tucked her daughters into bed that night, Hope's confident facade crumbled. There was no way she could raise the money in time. The drought had left their crops withering, and the townspeople barely purchased her baked goods and needlework anymore. They were being driven out, plain and simple, because a widow with 5 daughters was deemed worthless in a place that valued strong sons above all. The next morning, Hope hitched their wagon and loaded what vegetables she could salvage from their garden. The weekly trip to town for supplies had become an exercise in endurance, bearing the whispers, the sidelong glances, the outright refusals to trade fairly. "Mama, I can come with you," Elizabeth offered. "No, sweetheart. Abigail needs you. I won't be long." The journey into Redemption Creek took nearly an hour. As Hope guided the wagon down the main street, she held her head high despite feeling eyes on her from every porch and storefront. At the general store, Mr. Paulson barely acknowledged her presence, sliding her purchases across the counter with barely a word. "I'll need some medicine for my youngest," Hope said. "She's taken ill with a chest ailment." "Doctors across town," he replied curtly. "Can't help you here." As Hope turned to leave, a commotion outside drew everyone's attention. Raised voices, the thunder of hooves, and then a crowd gathering. Clutching her small package of purchases, Hope stepped onto the boardwalk to see what was happening. A group of men had surrounded a tall, broad-shouldered stranger with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer storm. His worn duster and dusty hat marked him as a man who lived in the saddle, but it was the quiet authority in his stance that held everyone's attention. "Like I said," the stranger was telling Sheriff Patterson, "I tracked them to the ravine south of here. 3 men, well armed. They've hit twice in Kansas already." "We don't need outsiders telling us our business, Garrett," one of the town councilmen, Henderson, spat. "Your kind brings nothing but trouble." The stranger, Garrett, didn't flinch. "My kind? You mean the kind that warns you about bandits setting up to raid your town? Suit yourself." He turned to remount his horse, a magnificent chestnut stallion. Sheriff Patterson stepped forward. "Now hold on, Hunter. Henderson doesn't speak for all of us. What exactly did you see?" Hope listened, fascinated despite herself, as the man called Hunter Garrett described the outlaw gang moving through the territory. There was something compelling about him, not just his obvious physical strength, but a kind of integrity that shone through his measured words. As the crowd dispersed, Hope made her way toward the doctor's office, but her path crossed with the stranger's as he led his horse toward the livery. "Excuse me," he said, tipping his hat politely. "No trouble," Hope murmured, stepping aside. His eyes lingered on her face a moment longer than necessary, and Hope felt a strange flutter in her chest that she quickly suppressed. She had no time for such foolishness. Her daughter needed medicine, and she had a farm to somehow save. At the doctor's office, her heart sank further. "That'll be $3 for the tonic," Dr. Williams said, not unkindly but firmly. Hope counted out her coins, realizing she'd have to forego flour and sugar this week. As she left, medicine clutched in her hand, she noticed dark clouds gathering on the horizon. A summer storm was brewing, and she needed to get home before it broke. She was halfway there when the first fat raindrops began to fall. By the time the homestead came into view, the rain was coming down in sheets, and thunder rolled across the sky. Hope urged the horse faster, worried about the roof that had been leaking since spring. As she pulled up to the cabin, she was startled to see smoke rising from the chimney despite the downpour. Heart racing, she jumped down from the wagon and rushed inside, only to freeze in the doorway at the sight that greeted her. The stranger from town, Hunter Garrett, was kneeling by the fireplace, building up the flames while Elizabeth stirred a pot that smelled better than anything they'd had in months. The other girls were gathered around the table, watching with wide eyes as this man, this cowboy, worked in their home. "What is the meaning of this?" Hope demanded, water dripping from her clothes. Hunter Garrett stood, his height impressive in the small cabin. "Mrs. Kendrick, I apologize for the intrusion. I was riding by when the storm hit and saw your roof. It's got a bad leak over the back room. I took the liberty of patching it temporarily." Elizabeth stepped forward. "He fixed the roof, Mama, and he brought medicine for Abigail and meat for the stew." Hope looked from her eldest daughter to the stranger, suspicion warring with gratitude. "That's very generous, Mr. Garrett, but just Hunter, please," he said, his voice deep but gentle. "And it's no trouble. I noticed your little one was sick when I rode past earlier. My mother was a healer of sorts, taught me to recognize the sound of pneumonia." Little Abigail coughed from her bed in the corner, and Hope immediately went to her, touching her forehead. The fever seemed lower already. "I gave her a spoonful of the medicine I carry," Hunter explained. "It's a mixture my mother made, works better than most doctors' tonics." Hope didn't know what to say. Kindness from strangers, especially male strangers, had been so rare since Thomas's death that she'd forgotten how to receive it gracefully. "Thank you," she managed finally, "but we can't repay you." A smile touched his lips, transforming his weathered face. "Not asking for payment, madam, just offering help to neighbors." "We're not neighbors," Hope said, confused. "Well, about that." Hunter glanced around at the girls, who were watching this exchange with rapt attention. "I've just purchased the old Miller place, 3 miles east of here. The cattle ranch, but it's been abandoned for years." "Not anymore," he said simply. "I've been looking for a place to settle. Seems like this is it." The storm continued through the evening, and despite Hope's protests, Hunter stayed to make sure the roof held. He sat at their table, telling stories that made the girls laugh for the first time in months. Even Hope found herself smiling as he described his adventures trailing wild horses in Montana territory. When it came time for the girls to sleep, Hunter excused himself to the barn, refusing Hope's offer of the single chair to spend the night in. "I've slept in worse places than a dry barn with good hay," he assured her. In the morning, he was gone before dawn, leaving behind only a neatly split pile of firewood and a small sack of coffee, a luxury Hope hadn't been able to afford in months. Over the next 2 weeks, Hunter appeared regularly, always with some excuse, bringing a spare tool, asking advice about local water sources, offering fresh game from his hunting. Each time, he would fix something around the homestead: the broken step, the stuck pump, the fence that kept falling. Hope maintained her cautious distance, even as her daughters increasingly looked forward to his visits. Abigail, especially, had taken a shine to the tall cowboy, who always seemed to have a story or small treasure, a pretty stone, a carved wooden animal just for her. "Why does he keep coming back?" Hope asked Elizabeth one evening as they washed dishes together. Elizabeth, wise beyond her years, smiled. "Maybe he's lonely too, Mama." The tax deadline loomed ever closer, and Hope had managed to scrape together barely a third of what was needed. She took on extra laundry from the hotel in town, sewed late into the night on commission pieces, and even sold her wedding ring, though she told no one about that sacrifice. One afternoon, Hunter arrived with his wagon loaded with lumber. "Thought I might fix that lean-to properly before fall comes," he said casually, as if rebuilding someone's outbuilding was a small favor. Hope had finally stopped protesting his help, but this was too much. "Mr. Garrett, Hunter, you can't keep doing this. People will talk." "Let them," he said, unloading the first boards. "People always talk. Question is whether what they say matters." "It matters when they're trying to run us off our land," Hope blurted out, immediately regretting the admission. Hunter straightened, his expression serious. "What do you mean?" Hope hesitated, then handed him the tax notice she kept in her apron pocket. He studied it, his jaw tightening. "This is robbery," he said finally. "They can't possibly justify this increase." "They can when the council wants the land for themselves," Hope said bitterly. "A woman with daughters has no value here. We can't work the fields properly, can't defend the property, can't carry on a family name. Better to give the land to men with sons." Hunter's eyes flashed with anger. "That's not right. Right doesn't enter into it. That's just how things are." "Not if I have anything to say about it," he replied, his voice steel beneath the velvet. The next day, Hope went into town to deliver her mending and found the place buzzing with gossip. Hunter Garrett, it seemed, had paid a visit to the town council meeting the previous evening and caused quite a stir. He threatened to take his business elsewhere, the shopkeeper's wife told Hope, clearly relishing the drama. Said he wouldn't spend a dime in a town that persecutes widows and children. And you know, he's been buying supplies by the wagon load for that ranch he's fixing up. Hope felt her cheeks burn. I didn't ask him to do that. Well, Henderson was fit to be tied, but the others got to thinking about all that business they'd lose. Not just Garrett's money, but the men he's hiring to help with the ranch, 6 cowhands already, with more coming when he brings in his herd next month. That evening, when Hunter stopped by with a repaired harness for Hope's plow horse, she confronted him. "You had no right to involve yourself in my affairs," she said, hands on her hips despite the fact that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "I didn't mention you by name," he said mildly. "You didn't have to. Everyone knows exactly who you were talking about." Hunter set down the harness and faced her squarely. "Hope, listen to me. What they're doing isn't just unkind, it's wrong. These girls," he gestured toward the cabin where her daughters were doing their evening chores, "deserve a chance, and so do you." "Why do you care?" Hope demanded, her voice cracking slightly. "What are we to you?" For a moment, Hunter was silent, his eyes searching her face. Then, quietly, "I lost my wife and son to fever 6 years ago in Kansas. I've been drifting ever since, never staying anywhere long enough to care. Until I rode into this valley and saw this place. Saw you standing up to that sheriff with 5 little girls depending on you." Hope's anger faltered, replaced by a complicated sympathy. "I'm sorry about your family." "I am too," he said simply. "And I'm sorry you lost your husband, but I admire what you're doing here, Hope. These girls are lucky to have such a mother." Before she could respond, a commotion from the road drew their attention. 3 riders approached, and Hope recognized Henderson and 2 other council members. "Garrett," Henderson called, his voice carrying across the yard. "A word." Hunter positioned himself slightly in front of Hope as the men dismounted. "Gentlemen," he said coolly, "what brings you out this way?" "Council's reconsidered the tax assessment," Henderson said grudgingly, "in light of circumstances." "What circumstances would those be?" Hunter asked, though the slight smile playing at his lips suggested he knew exactly what had prompted this visit. "Economic considerations," one of the other men put in smoothly. "We've adjusted the rate back to last year's assessment." He held out a new notice. Hope took it with trembling hands, hardly daring to believe what she was reading. The amount, while still difficult, was at least within the realm of possibility. "Very generous of you," Hunter said, his tone making it clear he thought it was merely basic decency. Henderson's eyes narrowed. "Don't think this means we approve of your interference, Garrett, or of how cozy you seem to be getting out here." His gaze slid to Hope with undisguised disapproval. "Mr. Henderson," Hope spoke up, finding her voice, "I appreciate the council's reconsideration. But I'd appreciate it even more if you'd keep your insinuations to yourself. Mr. Garrett has been a kind neighbor, nothing more." After the council members departed, Hope turned to Hunter, emotion welling up in her throat. "Thank you," she said simply. He shook his head. "Don't thank me. You still have to pay taxes that are too high for a widow trying to manage alone. It's still better than losing everything." Hunter hesitated, then said carefully, "There might be another solution, one that would make things easier for everyone." Hope looked at him questioningly. "I need help at my ranch, not just with the cattle but with making the house livable. It needs a woman's touch and company. It gets mighty quiet out there." Hope stiffened. "Are you offering me a job as your housekeeper?" "No," Hunter said, looking suddenly uncertain. "I'm doing this all wrong." "Hope, I'm trying to ask if you'd consider marrying me." The shock must have shown on her face because he quickly continued. "Not right away. We barely know each other, but I care for you and those girls already. I'd like the chance to be a family again. To give them a father who'll treasure daughters as the gifts they are." "Hunter," Hope began, her mind reeling. "That's too sudden," he finished for her. "I know. But I'm not getting any younger, and neither are you. Life out here is too short and too hard to waste time when you find something worth holding on to." Before Hope could formulate a response, Catherine came running from the cabin. "Mama! Abigail's fever is back." The crisis postponed their conversation, as they spent the night tending to the sick child. Hunter stayed, brewing a tea from herbs he carried in his saddlebag and sitting up with Abigail so Hope could rest. By morning, the fever had broken again. As dawn broke, Hope found Hunter on the porch, exhausted but watchful. "She's sleeping peacefully now," Hope told him, offering a cup of coffee. "Good," he said, accepting the cup with a grateful nod. "She's stronger than she looks, that one." "They all are," Hope said, settling beside him on the step. "Hunter, about what you said yesterday." He looked at her, expression carefully neutral. "You don't need to answer now or ever if you don't want to. The offer of help stands regardless." "Why?" she asked simply. Hunter gazed out at the sunrise painting the plains gold. "Because from the moment I saw you standing up to that sheriff, I recognized something in you that I thought I'd never find again. Courage, dignity, a heart big enough to face this hard world without becoming hard yourself." He turned to her, his eyes as open and vulnerable as she'd ever seen them. "And those girls, they remind me that there's still innocence and joy in this world even after all the loss. I want to protect that, help it grow." Hope studied his face, the lines etched by sun and sorrow, the quiet strength, the gentle way he spoke of her daughters. In just weeks, this man had done more for her family than the town had in 18 months since Thomas died. "I can't promise to love you," she said honestly. "Not yet." "I'm not asking for promises," Hunter replied. "Just a chance, for all of us." 3 days later, Hope invited Hunter to Sunday dinner, a small feast made possible by the rabbits he'd brought earlier in the week. The girls set the table with their best cloth, and Elizabeth had picked wildflowers for the center. As they sat together, Hope observed the easy way Hunter interacted with her daughters, listening seriously to Elizabeth's thoughts on the book she was reading, complimenting Eliza's quick arithmetic, admiring Margaret's careful stitching on a sampler, laughing at Catherine's bold declaration that she intended to learn to rope cattle, and gently helping Abigail cut her meat when her small hands struggled. After the meal, the older girls cleared the dishes while Hope and Hunter sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of gold and crimson. "I've been thinking about your proposal," Hope said quietly. Hunter nodded, waiting patiently. "The girls need stability, security." She turned to look at him directly. "And I need to know this isn't charity or pity." "It's neither," he assured her. "I won't lie and say I don't want to help you, but that's not why I'm asking. I'm asking because in 6 years of wandering, this is the first place that's felt like it could be home again, and that's because of you." Hope took a deep breath. "Then yes, not right away, but yes, I'll marry you, Hunter Garrett." His smile was like sunrise breaking through clouds. Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, he reached for her hand. When she allowed him to take it, his calloused thumb traced gentle circles on her palm. "We'll take it slow," he promised. "Court properly. Let the girls get used to the idea." But when they returned inside, the answer was written plainly on 5 eager faces peering around the kitchen doorway. Clearly, they'd been eavesdropping. "Are you going to be our new pa?" Catherine asked bluntly. Hunter knelt down to her level. "If you'll have me. Not to replace your father, he'll always be your pa, but I'd be honored to be a father to you girls." Elizabeth, always the most cautious, stepped forward. "Would we live at your ranch eventually?" Hunter said. "But we'd keep this place too, it's your home. And Mama would be happy." Elizabeth pressed, her young face serious. Hunter glanced up at Hope, his eyes full of promise. "I'll spend every day trying to make sure of it." The following Sunday, Hunter accompanied the family to church. The whispers started the moment they walked in together, but for once, They weren't hostile, merely curious, speculative. When Henderson's wife deliberately turned her back as they passed, Hunter merely smiled and placed a protective hand at Hope's back, guiding her to a pew. After the service, Reverend Fletcher approached them. "Mrs. Kendrick, Mr. Garrett, I understand congratulations might be in order." "We're taking things slowly, Reverend," Hope replied, feeling a flush rise to her cheeks. "But with your blessing, we'd like to announce our engagement," Hunter added, surprising Hope with his forthrightness. News spread through Redemption Creek like wildfire. The woman who bore only daughters was marrying the newcomer, the successful rancher who'd challenged the town council and won. Overnight, the whispers changed their tone. People who had shunned Hope now greeted her on the street. The general store suddenly had credit available for her. The hostility didn't disappear entirely, but it receded in the face of Hunter's quiet authority and growing influence. Over the summer and into fall, Hunter courted Hope properly, bringing gifts for her and the girls, taking them on picnics by the creek, teaching the older girls to ride and Abigail to fish. Hope watched as her daughters bloomed under his attention, and something inside her that had been locked away since Thomas's death began to thaw. The first time Hunter kissed her, they were alone on the porch after the girls had gone to bed. The harvest moon hung low and golden in the sky, and crickets sang in the tall grass. "May I?" he asked, his voice husky as he leaned toward her. Hope nodded, her heart suddenly racing like a girl's. His lips were gentle on hers, the kiss brief but full of restrained passion and promise. When he pulled back, she found herself following slightly, wanting more. Hunter smiled, tracing her cheek with one finger. "We have time," he murmured, "all the time in the world, but life in the West didn't always allow for such leisure." A week before their planned November wedding, Abigail's cough returned with a vengeance, worse than before. By nightfall, she was burning with fever, her small chest heaving with the effort to breathe. Hope sent Elizabeth for Hunter while she bathed the child in cool water, trying to bring down the fever. By the time Hunter arrived, riding hard through the darkness, Abigail was delirious, calling for her father. "We need to get her to a doctor," Hunter said, his face grave as he lifted the child's limp form. "Redemption Creek is too far," Hope said, panic rising in her throat. "She won't make it." "There's a doctor in Silver Springs," Hunter said, naming a small mining town 20 miles west. "He's good, treated one of my men last month. We can make it by dawn if we leave now." Without hesitation, Hunter wrapped Abigail in blankets and carried her to his wagon, which he'd had the foresight to bring instead of riding horseback. Hope climbed in beside him, cradling her daughter while Elizabeth promised to look after the younger girls. The journey through the night was harrowing. The roads were rough, and each jolt made Abigail moan in pain. Hunter drove with intense concentration, pushing the horses as fast as he dared in the darkness. Hope prayed continuously, holding her daughter close, feeling the heat of fever radiating through the blankets. "She can't die," Hope whispered at one point when Abigail seemed to stop breathing for a terrifying moment before gasping a ragged breath. "I can't lose her too." Hunter reached over with one hand, gripping Hope's arm. "She won't," he said with fierce determination. "I promise you that." They reached Silver Springs just as dawn was breaking, the small mining town still mostly asleep. Hunter knew exactly where to go, pulling up before a small house with a doctor's shingle hanging outside. He pounded on the door until a bleary-eyed man appeared. "My daughter needs help," Hunter said without preamble. "Pneumonia bad." Hope registered his words, "my daughter," but had no time to dwell on them as the doctor ushered them inside. The next hours passed in a blur of anxiety as the doctor examined Abigail, mixed medicines, applied mustard plasters, and instructed Hope on how to help ease the child's breathing. Through it all, Hunter never left their side, supporting Hope when she swayed with exhaustion, stepping in when her trembling hands couldn't manage a task, speaking words of encouragement to Abigail even when the child was too fevered to hear. By midday, the crisis had passed. Abigail's fever broke and she fell into a natural, healing sleep. "She'll recover," the doctor told them, "but she needs rest. I wouldn't move her today." Hunter arranged for rooms at the town's small hotel. As they sat beside Abigail's bed, watching her sleep peacefully at last, Hope felt the weight of the night's fear finally crash over her. Tears came unbidden, silent but unstoppable. Hunter's arm came around her shoulders, drawing her against his chest. "She's going to be all right," he murmured into her hair. "You called her your daughter," Hope said through her tears. "To the doctor." She felt rather than saw his nod. "That's how I think of them now, all 5 of them, as mine to protect and cherish." Hope pulled back enough to look into his face. "Do you mean that?" Hunter's eyes were steady, certain. "With all my heart. Hope, when I saw her so sick, I realized I'm already their father in every way that matters, and you," he cupped her face gently, "you're already my wife in my heart. I don't want to wait any more. The wedding can happen whenever Abigail is well enough, but I want you to know, here and now, this is my family." His voice caught slightly. "You and these girls are the greatest blessing I never thought to find again." Hope's tears flowed freely now, but they were different tears, healing, hopeful. "I love you," she whispered, the words she'd been afraid to say finally finding voice. "I love you, Hunter Garrett." His kiss was tender, reverent, a promise sealed between them as their daughter slept peacefully beside them. They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the church in Redemption Creek. All 5 girls stood with them, Elizabeth and Eliza holding bouquets of late autumn flowers, Margaret and Catherine proudly wearing new dresses Hunter had bought them, and Abigail, fully recovered, beaming as she threw flower petals with enthusiastic abandon. The town turned out in force, curiosity mingling with genuine goodwill for the couple who had defied convention and expectation. Even Henderson grudgingly shook Hunter's hand at the small reception afterward. That evening, as they sat together on the porch of what would now be their summer home, they decided to split their time between the homestead and Hunter's ranch. Hope watched her daughters playing in the yard with the puppy Hunter had given them as a wedding gift. "Happy?" Hunter asked, his arm warm around her waist. "More than I ever thought possible again," Hope answered honestly. "You've given us so much." Hunter shook his head. "You've given me more, a family, purpose, love." He kissed her temples softly. "And maybe someday more children." Hope smiled at the thought. "Boys or girls, it won't matter to you, will it?" "Not one bit," Hunter assured her. "Though I have to admit I've grown rather fond of daughters." As dusk fell, Hunter called to the girls. "Time to come in, my daughters. Your mother and I have a surprise for you." They came running, cheeks flushed with excitement and eyes bright with a happiness Hope had feared they might never know again. As they gathered around Hunter and Hope on the porch, Hunter announced that in the spring they would all travel to Denver to select furnishings for their rooms at the ranch. And, he added with a smile at Hope, to prepare for the new baby that will join our family next summer. The girls' squeals of delight echoed across the darkening plains, carrying with them the promise of new beginnings and the certainty that this family, once scorned for its abundance of daughters, had found its way home at last. Later that night, with the girls asleep and the house quiet, Hope lay in Hunter's arms, marveling at how completely her life had transformed in just a few months. "What are you thinking?" Hunter murmured, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "That love finds us in the most unexpected ways," Hope replied. "When I was at my lowest point, you appeared. No, Hunter corrected gently. When you were at your strongest standing alone against an entire town, raising 5 beautiful girls with dignity and grace, that's when I found you. And recognized the woman I'd been searching for without knowing it. Hope nestled closer, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her cheek. Outside, the wind whispered across the Colorado plains, carrying with it the first hint of winter. But inside, wrapped in the warmth of a love that had bloomed against all odds, Hope Kendrick Garrett knew that whatever seasons came, they would face them together, this family that had been forged not by blood alone, but by choice, courage, and the transformative power of unconditional love.